He loves me. He loves me not. He loves me. He loves me not. So is the lament at Fox News of late as President Donald Trump cycles through those feelings in rapid succession. This time on Poll Hub, the latest reason he's hating the news network, it is their poll. And we know something about polls, so we're going to talk about it. Plus, don't forget about us. That's Nevada's cry heading into the 2020 presidential primary. Their caucus comes hot on the heels of Iowa and New Hampshire, so how come nobody's talking or even polling the Silver State? Well, we've got an expert on the line, so we better get to it. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm Jay DeDapper, Director of Innovation here at the Marist Poll.
And I'm Lee Miringoff, Director of the Marist College Institute for Public Opinion, and somebody's missing.
Barbara. Hey, Barb.
Nope, not here today.
Oh, okay.
We're going to have to do it all by ourselves.
Just us guys.
Okay.
Let me apologize in advance to the audience that it's just us guys, because Barb is definitely the one that most of you probably tune into here. But she's taking the day off. So, hey, let's talk about the Fox News poll. And let me just start by saying, I cannot tell you how many conversations I have with people where when the Fox News poll comes up, whether they're on one side or the other of the political spectrum, they believe, oh, well, it's Fox News, so of course it's biased. So I just want to, before we do anything else, talk about the Fox News poll as a scientific, valid, statistically sound poll.
The scientific, valid statistical sample of Fox News poll is better rivaled than no other. This is an excellent poll. Those in the field know, and if you don't like Fox News, particularly after the sun goes down, there's no reason why you should dislike or distrust the Fox poll. Not to be confused with, of course, the Marist Red Fox poll, which is
that's a whole other. So the president is not happy because Fox News put out a poll last week that was a pretty unfavorable poll towards him, and he criticized Fox in general, and he criticized the poll. Is this just sour grapes? And not only did that poll show him with some questionable approval ratings, it's almost identical to what the NBC Wall Street Journal poll came up with, and they were in the field pretty much at the same time frame. So you have two quality polls, both putting Donald Trump's approval rating in the low 40s. I think the number may have been identical at 43%, so that couldn't be any closer than that. And I thought the president's comment on this, my worst polls have been coming from Fox. There's something going on there. I don't like it. They're making a big mistake because I'm the guy who controls the debates, which all stuff in there. And they referred to, we have a lot of good folks at Fox News, and cited the people who, the usual cast of characters. So I think he's way, way ahead of his skis on this one in terms of the accuracy of the poll. And it's, this is Donald Trump being Donald Trump. One of the things that really, I think, got under his skin was it showed, and other polls have asked this, but this was the one that got a lot of attention, head-to-head, hypothetical head-to-head matchups, where Trump loses by 12 to Joe Biden, by 9 to Bernie Sanders, by 6 to Kamala Harris, and by 7 to Elizabeth Warren. These, at this point, are not candidates people don't know. These are not kind of, well, that seems like a nice name. What, Warren? Sure, that sounds good. People know these people now, especially Joe Biden. And this is not a question of voters having a lack of information about making the decision. If the election were held today, knowing the quality of the Fox News poll, you can pretty much be sure that these people would beat Trump by that margin in a national. And
important to note, looking at those numbers, when you do have an incumbent and a well-known challenger, the incumbent, well, what's the barometer there? And right now, Donald Trump is actually scoring a little bit below in the toss-ups of his approval rating. And I thought the NBC Wall Street Journal poll had a very interesting insight into this number. They looked at the people who say that he's doing a decent job on the economy, and which is a higher number than his approval rating, usually around 50. And then they looked at the approval rating, and there's a gap of 6, 7, 8 points between those who think he's doing good on the economy and his approval rating. And then they looked at who those people prefer, and they, by an overwhelming number, prefer a generic, unnamed Democrat over Donald Trump. So that gap, which we've talked about on this program before, that gap between his economic performance and his approval rating, and he's not even scoring his approval rating in these toss-ups. That's really the worrisome thing for the White House, I would think.
So how much of this is Donald Trump gaming the system or ginning up his supporters in the same way that he talked about fake news during the last campaign and still does, and talked throughout that campaign about when he lost, because he thought he was going to lose to Hillary Clinton, that the results would be probably faked because, of this, that, and the other thing. How much of this is in that vein, and how dangerous is that to the polling community?
Well, I think it's part of what we have to watch out in terms of turnout and likely voter models down the road, in terms of looking at the different groups that are going to be reacting both favorably and unfavorably to the message. Clearly, what he's been doing is he's not been reaching out to get these so-called suburban females who have been opposing him to try to bring them in. He's just trying to run up the score among his base, and that's what he's been doing for the last couple of years, and there's no sign of any change of that. And now if he takes Fox News into his criticism aim, that's a whole new ballgame.
Yeah, it seems like he has switched things up here, although he has been complaining about Fox. But I do think we're going to keep an eye on this idea that when he gets a poll that he doesn't like, it's a bad poll. He's been saying that before, but there's almost no polls left other than maybe Rasmussen, which is, whatever, that actually have good polls for him.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking also, I saw that Nate Silver, of course, of 538, had a comment about polls in general a while back. I guess it's 80 to 90% of the time he says that a campaign gets to a public argument about polling, it isn't doing itself any favors. So I think that probably works well for what's been going on right now with the president and Fox News.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, is kind of working the ref, if you will. But these polls are statistically sound. There is no ref to work. It's like he's working the replay cam, and well, I don't think that may work so well for him, but we'll see.
And now we'd like to bring in Jon Ralston, editor of the Nevada Independent and political analyst extraordinaire, all things Nevada. Jon, thank you for joining us on our podcast today.
It's my pleasure, and that introduction puts a lot of pressure on me.
Okay, well, I'm sure you'll, the bar is set, but I'm sure that won't be a problem. Okay, so let's get right to the chase here. Nevada counts enormously in the primary process. It's not new. You just don't get a lot of attention leading up to the primary from the polling community. What gives? What's the problem there?
Well, you'd know better than this, as I'm talking to a couple of elite effete East Coasters here who have this terrible view of Nevada. But it's like we're the ugly stepchild of the early states, right? The main problem, I think, is that we're still relatively new to this game, right? By relatively new, I mean it's been about a decade or so. And so I think because Nevada is such a weird, quirky state, and that's a fact, it's not any bias coming from anyone outside of Nevada. And because Iowa and New Hampshire are so entrenched in the process, I think we just get a lot less attention.
So yeah, let's lay it out for listeners. Iowa obviously is first. The Iowa caucuses this year in early February. There have been years when I spent as a political reporter in Des Moines on New Year's Eve celebrating, waiting for the caucuses to begin. But they're later this year. New Hampshire follows, and then Nevada. And as you mentioned, it's earlier than it has been, and then South Carolina is after that. These are the four states that really matter, and that's why we want to focus on Nevada, because it's the first Western state. How much does that play into it, that we have a Midwestern state that's traditional, a quirky Northeastern state, a Southern state, and then you guys represent everybody else?
You know, it's interesting because we do actually represent everybody else, and it hasn't always been the case with Nevada, but as Nevada's changed, I've been here, believe it or not, 35 years now, and the way that the state, and especially Las Vegas, has grown and changed, we really are now more representative of the country than any of the other early states. If you look at the demographics and the rising Hispanic vote and even the rising Asian vote here, we really are. Las Vegas is a melting pot. It really has changed demographically.
Literally and figuratively, right?
That's right. Yeah. Exactly right. I walked into that one, but yes, we will be in triple digits very shortly here today, and will remain so until sometime in September, I think. But the point is that I do think that now they like to play it up as the gateway to the West, first in the West. But we're more than that. We're actually the first state that votes that really looks more like America than the first two states.
Yeah, interesting point, and I think also just demographically, it's also becoming more non-white. It's more white whites with college education, fewer whites without a college education. So it is moving, at least on the Democratic caucus side, I guess, in the direction of where the National Democratic Party is right now. A lot of pollsters use what may be the cop-out about it being a caucus and therefore hard to poll. Obviously, Iowa's a caucus as well. Are there any special poll problems that you see from methodological standpoint in polling Nevada? And maybe that's part of the reason why folks stay away.
Now, the only obviously different and kind of quirky aspect to Nevada is that there's a lot of workers here because of the casino business here who work strange hours. They may be harder to get a hold of because it's a 24/7 environment, but really it shouldn't be that hard. Yes, a caucus does make it more difficult. It's going to be especially difficult, I think, gentlemen, this year because they're changing the rules of the caucus. They're going to have televoting. They're going to have early voting. I think it's going to be much more difficult until you get closer to pinpoint who is actually going to attend the caucus, even if people will say in August of 2019 that they are going to attend a caucus in February of 2020. And as you both know, what happens in Iowa and what happens in New Hampshire affects what happens in Nevada. So who wins those two states? Who is still in the race? Who needs to win Nevada to stay in the race or to increase momentum from the first two states? That's going to determine turnout too. So it's very difficult to tell who is going to turn out for these caucuses beyond all of the arcane rules that don't apply, obviously, in a primary such as New Hampshire.
And the turnout tends to be low in Iowa, which makes matters, I guess, even more problematic. I meant Nevada, sorry.
Yeah, the turnout has generally been relatively low. The other problem with Nevada, I think, for pollsters is most, or too many of them, don't realize that Nevada is essentially three states. It's Las Vegas, Reno, and then the 15 other counties which are rural Nevada. And while they don't matter as much in a Democratic caucus, they do matter, even though they're very red. And the first time that really came home was when Hillary Clinton won the state against Barack Obama on caucus day by about 5 percentage points, but lost the actual delegate fight 13-12 because Obama was smart enough, his campaign realized how the delegates were apportioned by congressional district and actually went to rural Nevada. I'll never forget when Barack Obama appeared in Elko, of all places. I didn't know Democrats had even heard of Elko. And then and he went to Elko. So they knew what they were doing back then. I must say, though, there have been pollsters who have taken the time to learn about the state and have done pretty good work here, but it is very, very difficult, I think, to get good results here, especially this far out for the caucus.
I think you raised two really interesting points. One is that polling Nevada now, polling New Hampshire now, polling any state, maybe other than Iowa right now, you risk missing what happens, leading up to it. So what happens in Iowa, as you said, what happens in New Hampshire. If you're polling now, it doesn't say a whole lot because everything can and will change based on what happens in those two states. The other thing, though, is my first job in politics, political reporter, was in Iowa, and I went to a caucus to cover it, as a 23-year-old, whatever, reporter. And I was amazed by how arcane and bizarre and strange it is. What's interesting to me is, one, that Nevada adopted the caucus structure and then has moved it forward into this era. But what's really interesting to me is what you mentioned, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about the mechanics of what do you think this makes a difference. And that is the phone-in, the internet, whatever it is, the new technology, that kind of fundamentally changes the caucus being whoever shows up to the high school gym at 7 o'clock that night and is willing to stick around through the rounds of voting. Is this going to change the way that the caucus results, play out, and will it change who shows up and who is, or not shows up, who is counted, who is actually caucusing?
That's the fundamental question. And I think the state Democratic Party, which has put a lot of work into this and is one of the most skillful operations and populated by really talented people, is thinking about every day. I think they're all sitting there right now as we're talking in the state Democratic Party headquarters with their fingers crossed, hoping that everything is going to go well, that it's not going to be a disaster, that they're going to have the count done that evening. There have been some noteworthy problems, mostly on the Republican side, to be honest with you, in counting votes. It took them 3 days once to count the caucus votes. And so Nevada, that's helped give Nevada a bad rep, but they don't know. They've never done the televoting before. They've never done early voting before, internet voting before. They are trying to, obviously, from their point of view as a political party, they want to expand participation. And what the Democrats have done amazingly well here, and this started in 2008, is they've registered tons of voters on caucus day. I believe, and I'd have to look it up. I'm getting old now, gentlemen. My memory isn't what it was. I think they registered 30,000 new voters the first time they did this caucus in 2008. The numbers have not...
Which is as many people as show up to the caucuses in a bad year in Iowa.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And so the numbers haven't been that large since, but they've been pretty substantial. And now they're trying to expand this, which they see as a vehicle to voter registration, and then using that with their formidable turnout machine here. It's why that efforts to make Nevada a primary state have been thwarted generally by Democratic leaders, including one time Harry Reid calling up to legislators when there was a primary bill to try to make sure the state remained a caucus state. They see this as an organizing tool as much as anything else.
Interesting. Well, you're certainly going to get a flood of attention after New Hampshire with the candidates and campaigns leading up to Nevada, if not before. And when we get to Nevada caucus, it's certainly going to be a very different picture, I guess, of what the Democratic field looks like. What's your sense on the ground of who has an early edge, assuming they're going to still be playing primary ball in the state right now?
You know, I'll answer that question again. I don't think it's dispositive of a lot, except to say who really is going to make a play for Nevada, and we can be pretty sure of it. Elizabeth Warren probably has the biggest footprint in the state, and has just announced opening 5 more offices. But Bernie Sanders, as you may remember, who did very well here in 2016, and there was a lot of controversy about just how well he did. And Hillary Clinton, after New Hampshire, was quite worried that she was going to lose the state, and she almost did to Bernie Sanders. He still has a fervent following here, and they have staff on the ground, as does Senator Harris, who has gotten 2 fairly prominent political activists who understand Nevada to help organize her on the ground. They are all here. Joe Biden got in late to the race. He got into Nevada late as well, but he is starting to staff up. The others have staff here, but compared to the ones I just mentioned, it's not significant.
One last question before we let you go. When you look at 2016 and the role that Nevada played, both in the general and in the caucuses, and you look now, you've talked about how fast Nevada's growing. How different a state is it for Democrats or Republicans, for Trump or Democrats? How different a state is it in 2020 than it was just 4 years ago?
Well, it's not as different in 2020. It won't be as different in 2020 as it was 4 years ago, as it was maybe 10 years earlier or even 20 years earlier, when it was, Republicans were winning this state, except for Clinton. When Ross Perot was on the ballot twice and barely won the state, every cycle since LBJ until Obama won. But the state has now started to change, and the demographic changes have benefited the Democrats. And in 2004, when Harry Reid decided to bring in some very skilled field operatives from outside the state to organize the party and to get ready for this, the state is really tilted toward the Democrats. The Republicans got wiped out the last 2 cycles, the presidential cycle in 2016 and again in 2018. And the democratically controlled legislature and a Democratic governor enacted same-day registration motor voter passed at the ballot. All of these things make it very, very difficult. And if for Republicans, and if you add in the fact that Las Vegas and Clark County, which is where Las Vegas is, has so many more Democratic voters than Republicans. In fact, very soon, the Republicans are going to be behind everyone not registered with a major party, the others and nonpartisans in Clark County. That's how bad it is for them. And as Clark County goes, generally that's how the state goes, because 2/3 to 3/4 of the electorate will vote here.
Very good. This is something we're going to keep an eye on because I think, as you point out accurately, Nevada reflects the nation more than it reflects just the West, and I think that's a really interesting point, and one that makes you, in the first four states, you the one that really is the most interesting to watch in so many ways. So, Jon Ralston, editor of the Nevada Independent, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And that will do it for this edition of Poll Hub. Poll Hub is a production of Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York. Mary Griffith is our executive producer, as she has been from the beginning, and Casey Schaff is our editor. Both do superb work for us.
And we'd like to thank the Roper Center Archive at Cornell University. They provide us with the ability to look back in time at survey questions and results over the decades. Super useful. It's part of the reason that I think we have an interesting discussion almost every week, because looking back in time, being able to see trends is part of the most interesting thing, at least to me, in polling. If you've got a question for us, if you've got questions you'd like us to ask in polls, or you just want to, comment on something, be nice, reach out on social media. We're at Marist Poll on Twitter, Marist Poll on Facebook. Don't forget to subscribe and check out in the show notes if you want to find out that election project that they're doing in Nevada to track the candidates. I'll get it out. We're going to have it in the show notes. You can link through to there and check that out. And you can be following Nevada as closely as Jon Ralston does. We'll see you next time.